So it looks like it's 5:30. So I think there may be more individuals trickling in, but I think this is pretty much the committee for this semester. I know Dr. Bosco and Cindy Bontrager are also ex officios on this committee, and so they'll be here at other meetings, if not coming in a little later. I think they might have to vote today, which is important.
That's something by a little later.
Yeah. And so I think the bulk of, you can all access an agenda in print there at the center of the room, but it's pretty light, so nothing too heavy to work through here. But Jack and I are really excited to get started with this committee. I'm Jessica Van Rankin. Just kind of skipped over that part. And
I'm Jack Garris, I serve as the Speaker of the Student Senate this term. So I just actually got to give a little intro to this in Faculty Senate. I think it was part right after you left, and we were excited to get going. Especially it's November, we have a little bit of time where we can have some real focus on education, and I am just really excited to get going.
yeah, I think you'll find throughout the year and hopefully over the next 2 or 3 meetings that we have that this committee does really important work in making tuition and fee recommendations to the university president, who ultimately passes those decisions on to that he or she kind of decides on the official recommendation to pass on to the Board of Regents. And so you're really making a huge impact here and giving a lot of important input. And so I think it's really important that this committee receives a pretty thorough education about the context within which you're working, of where we are with the university budget on the whole, and kind of the factors that go into your decision making here with making tuition and fee recommendations. And so that kind of educational component is why Jack and I thought it would be a great idea to have someone from the budget office, Ethan Erickson, come and talk a little bit about the university budget and correct anything I might misspeak regarding the budget. So I know he has a really great PowerPoint presentation prepared, and so you can see it on both ends of the room.
Yeah,
Jack's
I was going to explain this. Bill Harlow and I, threw some stuff at the wall today, and a couple things stuck. Excuse me, I need to really start going to class. So,
At least that English class.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, so what we have here, primarily for the purpose of, we have a member from China that serves here in Macy Chanel Russell on Jessica's cabinet, and I guess might have a miscommunication today, but anyway, she's not zoomed into us tonight, but she hopefully will be in future semesters or future meetings. The other thing reason why we have this in here is because there is this camera going, and we're hoping one of the things we want to do this year is make sure that the information that gets to our campus is accurate. There's usually there has been, I guess, a collision reported here, and so we're hoping that with some video technology we can have the ability, and that's a microphone and note table, by the way, to make sure that all that information is accurate
and make sure that students, if they want to look back at archives of videos of the Tuition and Fee Strategies Committee, can do that and can know what we discussed and what kind of recommendations and discussion we had about their finances. So, yeah, Ethan, if you want to go into your presentation.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here. What a way to spend your election night, right? Talking about the budget. Nothing more exciting than that. I'm Ethan. I am the budget director here at the university. Thought today we could talk, and we're going to talk a couple different levels of the budget. We'll start out with some budget terms and definitions. We'll switch into the overall K-State budget. When I say overall, that's including what you're thinking of primarily as the main campus. We also have a section that's called Extension and Research, and we also have the Vet Med budget as well. So we'll cover that. Then we'll kind of narrow down into more of the main campus general use budget. But we'll get into some of those. And I want to say, stop me and ask questions. There's a lot of people on campus that may not understand all the intricacies. I probably don't understand all the intricacies. So if you have anything, you don't understand anything, just raise a hand and we'll just keep this pretty relaxed, if that's okay.
And I wonder if, I'm sorry to interrupt already. Yep. I wonder if it would be helpful. I just realized with it being our first committee meeting, I skipped over introductions of the whole committee. I apologize. I think that is just in the craziness of a first committee meeting. And so I don't know if that would be helpful context for you too, to know who's in the room with this conversation. So if you want to just go around and say your name and maybe what college you're representing here, or if you're Dr. Bennett or Provost Mason, what kind of area or office you're representing.
I'm Kat Gutman, and I'm the Southern Gray Architecture College. I'm Sarah Sparky. I'm not really representing anything. I'm microbiology major.
Well, what college are you with? Or are you arts and sciences?
Yeah, arts and
Yeah.
sciences. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
Or
Drew.
Human ecology?
No,
Okay.
I used to be,
Okay.
and I switched majors.
Okay.
So,
I'm Drew Borman. I'm with the College of Business.
I'm Victor Valdez. I'm with the College of Arts and Sciences.
April Mason, I serve as the provost and senior vice president and spend a lot of time with Ethan talking about these numbers. He's answered every single dumb question I've had, so please ask him questions. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I'm Matt Daly. I'm from the College of Agriculture.
Ethan. Jordan Deloach. I'm sitting in for Vice President Kennedy and taking minutes tonight. I'm not actually on the committee.
I'm Andy Bennett. I'm president of the Faculty Senate, and in my day job, I'm head of the Department of Mathematics in Arts and Sciences.
I'm Jonathan Pushin. I'm an ex officio member of the committee as the privilege fee chair from the College of Engineering.
Sherman Yee. I'm a senator and representing the graduate school.
And I'm Megan Terry, and I represent the veterinary medical school.
I think we kind of already introduced myself, but I will say I'm Jack Harris, Speaker of the Senate, and I am from the College of Engineering.
Jessica Van Rankin, student body president, College of Arts and Sciences.
All right. Let's just start with some common terms and the definitions of those terms that you might hear as you're carrying out your work on the committee.
Not working?
Oops. It was working. Does this turn off or something? Oh, there we go. There.
Well,
no, that would work.
That's because I.
Oh, you moved it on forward for me. There we go.
Awesome.
Well,
Can I just say,
you just have to
you want me to just
walk
tell
over.
you?
I
just want to walk back and forth. Yeah, just a common term, fiscal year, just to help you understand, that's our 12-month period that we operate here at the university. It starts July 1 of each year and ends June 30th. And so right now we are currently in fiscal year 2017 because it'll end on June 30th of 2017. Other terms that you're going to hear, OOE, what does that really mean? We have salaries and wages. That's basically how we pay our employees, all the fringe rate costs that go along with that. So just along with our base salary, we have health insurance costs, we have workers' compensation, insurance costs, all those fringe benefit rates that go along with that. That's our salaries and wages budget. And then we have everything else, what we call our OOE budget, other operating expenditures. That's going to be your classroom materials, travel costs, office supplies, things like that. So you'll have primarily within the university setting, most of our budget is tied up in salaries and wages, and our OOE budget is pretty minor. I'll show you some percentages there. We also in the budget, we break it out into 3 different sub-agencies. We have what we call our main campus, we have our vet med, and we have research and extension. Because we are a land grant university, along with that land grant mission comes with extension activities that we go out and service all the 105 counties out there, providing extension activities. We also do a significant amount of agricultural research. And so we budget that separately from just our main campus. We've done that primarily, well, for a couple reasons, so that we have some clarity between our different roles. But also when we go before the legislature and people want to automatically compare K-State's budget to KU's budget to say how does this compare? We can generally look at our main campus budget and compare that to the KU budget and have a little better comparison between the two. We try to roll in research and extension, just makes it a little more messy and people don't have as good clarity between the 2 agencies. You'll hear State General Fund, SGF. Those are our state dollars that come directly to us from the state of Kansas. They're appropriated by the legislature on an annual basis. We also have student tuition, which is what you're here today, and we'll be working on the rest of this year. Those are the funds paid by students based on charges for per credit hour. Now, to be clear, that is your base tuition. When I refer to it here as student tuition, when you have some specific college fees, we account for those slightly differently, and I'll show you that here in a second. This is where we get into what we call and what we worry about a lot within the Budget Advisory Committee here at the university is our general use budget. This is our general operating budget that we sort of have to, we worry about a lot. how it's impacted when the state reduces our appropriations. And so that's our main operating base that we use here at the university. And what we call GU is really a combination of our state dollars and our tuition dollars. And then a little bit of vet med hospital revenue, and that's what we kind of consider our general use. And again, I'm talking in terms of the overall state budget or overall university budget.
Ethan, you mentioned the University Budget Advisory Committee. Jack and Jessica sit on that committee, as does Andy, as does Dr. Bosco, Vice President Bontrager, and myself. And Ethan is a staff member to that committee, getting us spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet.
It's fun. So we have GU, again, that's your base tuition dollars and our state dollars that come together. We count those as our GU. And then we have an RU budget, our restricted use budget. And that is dollars that come in specifically to the university for specific purposes. We can't commingle those necessarily for general operation expenses. And I wanted to point out, to be clear, when you're looking at that tuition and fee schedule, those college-specific fees are deposited into the RU funding sources. And so those go directly to the college and are managed directly by the college. They are not included in any sort of general university callback that you might hear or budget cut that you might hear us talk about potentially through a fiscal year. Another big source of revenue that we have here is what's called sponsored research overhead. Basically, whenever someone might get a federal grant, a portion of that federal grant is sliced off the top and provided to the university to cover incidental costs that are occurring related to helping to carry out that grant. So accounting functions, building functions, things like that are helped and covered by indirect costs coming in from those grants. We also have our federal land grant, again mentioned. Oh, I'm sorry. As a land grant institution, we do have federal land grant dollars that come in and help provide our research and extension activities. And this is just a geographical to help you understand. K-State has a statewide impact, really, a global impact if you really want to get into it at some levels. But here are our experiment fields and our research centers that are located throughout the state to kind of give you a broader impact and understanding of just the vastness that K-State impacts here in the state of Kansas. We also have, within our overall budget, auxiliary funds, and so housing, dining, parking, student health. Those are dollars that are collected based on fees charged for those services, and those dollars go directly back to those units. Those are not included in any sort of general campus operations. Those are charged and collected and managed by those specific units in there. We also have within our overall university budget local agencies. That is our K-State Athletics, our student union, and our student publications. Again, any of those dollars collected by those entities are managed by those entities, but we do include them in our overall budget picture that we have. And then we have what's called a service clearing fund, and those are dollars that we might charge. So if I'm in IT and I go perform a service for the College of Ag, I might go charge that College of Ag for the function of the performance of those services, and then I use those dollars to offset my costs within the information technology department. So here's our operating budget for FY17. It's $868 million. It's broken out. You'll see there we have our state appropriations. And this is, again, our overall university budget, including vet med and research and extension, main campus. We have our student tuition. We have our hospital and diagnostic lab revenues out at the vet med, our federal land grant funds, and then our gifts, grants, and contracts. And I'll cover that in a second. Auxiliary enterprises, service clearing, local agencies. So the first two categories there account for about 45% of the university's budget, our state appropriations and our student tuition. The next bigger category that you see there, that $292 million, that's 33%, our gifts, grants, and contracts. That's really just a lump sum of wide variety of funding sources that are way too long to list in any sort of concise document that we put out there. But that would include restricted fees, those fees that might be charged by the colleges specifically. That goes into that line item. We also have research grants that are awarded to us. Those go into there, and then any sort of gifts that we have for our operations, those are in there as well. We also have some specific funding that comes into us as, for if you're in the engineering, you have the CANGRO, the University Engineering Initiative Act. Those dollars come in specifically into that gifts, grants, and contracts line, and that's where those dollars are spent on. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, Olathe and Polytechnic are in the main campus budget fund. Or are they in the research?
Yes, they're in the main campus budget. Lots of times what we'll do when we're working in the budget advisory committee, Polytechnic manages their own budget. If they collect their revenues, they have to manage any sort of callbacks, so we exclude those from any sort of calculation that we're looking at. But you're right, it's in the main campus.
The comment on gifts, grants, and contracts, Ethan, those come to a specific purpose, so they have to be spent on that specific purpose. And it looks like a big chunk of money. Why aren't we using it in different ways? We got the grant because we said we would do X, Y, Z. You got to do X, Y, Z, and you're accountable for that.
And a big chunk of this is also federal research activity. And we don't include it in our federal land grant funds because it's not specific to our land grant mission, but that's where those federal dollars would end up in. Yeah. Oh, which one? Who?
Go for it,
Dr. Roscoe?
You mean that we collect more in student tuition than the state gives us to operate the university?
That's correct.
And
That's
crossed
correct.
over in 2011.
That is correct.
Crossed over in
I've got some more
2011.
slides that show, give more of a 10-year historical perspective for you as well. Yeah.
So you native Kansans, take note.
Keith, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So I understand gifts and grants. What would be an example of a contract?
A contract performance, a performance agreement that somebody might have also for a research activity with a private entity, something like that. Yeah.
Another contract might be with our, we may have this in the diagnostic laboratory, but they'll say, you know, you'll do X number of samples for this amount of money.
Yeah. Another one that's in there, not necessarily a contract, is dollars that we receive from the state for the NBAF transition research that's occurring as well. So while Plum Island is being decommissioned, some of the initial research is being performed in our BRI. And so we get about $5 million a year from the state that helps with that transition research until NBAF comes online. Yeah.
Gifts, grants, and contracts are all above and beyond the operation expenses,
Yeah.
correct? So it's nothing like if one specific department got this much money, the operation expenses would go down. It's all additional in addition.
That's right. That's right. Now, mechanically, what does happen is whenever there is a base budget callback, people start looking at how do I manage that kind of a callback. And so sometimes people get creative in how they manage that, and maybe a function that was, or a person that was performing a base budget sort of function might not do that anymore, but then moves over into a more of a restricted function that then primarily one of our major objectives at the university has been to prevent sort of layoffs or furloughs as we've gone through budget reductions here. So that's a function of what happens as you get into managing it. Okay. Here's just as a pie chart, you can kind of see again, this one, this first one is our state general fund and tuition. That's 45% of the budget. And then the next biggest chunk is the gifts, grants, 33%. We have within this budgeted a total of about 5,500 FTE positions on the budget. And so you can kind of get a sense then of how big of an organization that we are as a university. We're bigger than a lot of some rather large organizations, honestly.
How many FTEs did you say?
5,500. Yeah, 5,546. That would include faculty, staff, maintenance, extension agents, all that is out there. It's all included. So let's talk then just our general use budget. And I mentioned the positions because then I want you to see just for our GU budget, that's again just our tuition and our state appropriations. You can look between our main campus, vet med, and research and extension for salaries and wages alone, $302 million, or 74% of our overall budget. our general use budget is tied up in salaries and wages for people here at the university. People providing services for students, researchers, all of that. Our OOE budget is $104 million, or 26%. Now, what's unique is within these dollars is a large chunk of money set aside for utility payments. So the lights, the energy, the air conditioning, when it works, the water. If you're in Call Hall, you had a lot of problems with electricity. I don't know if they got free ice cream as it melted, but at least they. So we have our utility budget in there, and that is $17 million, and financial aid. Those are scholarships that are scholarship aid that we provide. That's built into our general use budget. That's $18.9 million, or $35.9 million for a total. So if you took that out of the OOE budget, that 35.9, then really our salaries and wages is a much higher percentage of our budget. It's about 81% at that point of our general use budget is tied up in people. So we just have two very big, large OOE categories sort of throw off some of these percentages.
So Ethan, it's not uncommon for a department head or a dean to say to me that 92% of my budget is in people. How does that happen when overall 81% of the budget is in people?
Could be the dean's office might have instructional reserve funds set aside within that dean's office, not within the department's office. The central reserve is in there. So you've got some pockets of budget that might be set aside centrally or centrally within the college that then sort of throws off that calculation.
Or another strategy that we've used is we disproportionately take the money away from OOE for our budget cuts and kept salaries and staff.
Yeah.
So you take away every dollar you have, and supplies and travel and supporting the department, and just keep employees.
And yet there's still $104 million somewhere out there to support OOE.
Yeah. Well, and again, take away 35.9.
Yeah.
And that's tied up in two very large categories. Yeah.
Usually we'll see that was 5 years ago.
The utility budget, the scholarship budget. Oh, the OE. I could find that probably.
So utility and scholarships was 35.9.
Mm-hmm. From the GU budget.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Everybody still there? Okay. I know Dr. Bennett's classes are much more thrilling than this, so as long as he's awake, right? And it's always fun to talk about inflation adjustment with our math department chair. So what we wanted to look at are some funding trends over a 10-year period. And so what we decided to do is using the Higher Education Pricing Index, we adjusted for the inflation. And the HEPI is typical items that higher ed institutions purchase. And so that's different than the Consumer Price Index, but the same concept essentially. So what we decided to do is we went back to 2006 and adjusted for inflation to 2016. Again, this is the general use budget, and it's all campuses, and it's the state funding. So this is just looking at the state funding trend, how much the state has been investing in our general use budget over that 10-year period. And so you can see back in 2006, state was actually providing about 60% of our general use budget. When you get to today, or 2016 anyway, it's about 40% of our budget. So we've seen a rather significant decline in investment of state resources to provide that educational experience here at K-State.
And that's just the GU.
This is just the GU, yeah. Now, you'll see the tuition trend. Again, back in 2006, it was 40% of the budget. We get to 2016, it's 60% of the budget. We've had to offset the state loss with tuition. Now, this isn't just solely tuition rate increases. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. This includes enrollment growth that occurred for us for a number of years prior to about 2015, 2016, when we've seen just a little bit of an enrollment decline. but we have an enrollment growth built into there. We have tuition rate increases built into there. It has helped us maintain our overall educational activities here, or operational activities. So here they are, just to the trends combined. You can see 2011 is when those two lines intersected, and we have had to start, the tuition has had to provide more of the operating share for the general use budget compared to the state funding. This is not unique to K-State. It's not unique to Kansas. This is a trend that's occurring nationwide. As budgets went through the recession, the states have had to disinvest, if you want to say, in universities.
Some universities, that crossover point occurred much earlier. Colorado State, for example, that crossover point occurred earlier than it did here at Kansas State.
Any questions? All right. I'm sure Hillary's winning. Let's talk about expenses and cost management. This is the main campus. Just to kind of give you some scope, we have 863 acres of campus, 211 buildings. We manage 26 acres of streets, 127 acres of sidewalks. You can't tell it, but supposedly there's 134 acres of parking that you can use. We've had a lot of these streets torn up the last couple of years, but that's all for the benefit and future benefit of the university. So kind of give you a little bit of scope of what the budget supports. Yeah.
Is this just Manhattan? Or is
This is pretty much just Manhattan. I didn't include the ag, North Ag Farm, but pretty much just the Manhattan area.
But it does have that college in it. Yeah. Those are that 127 acres of sidewalks that we want cleared immediately after.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, if I remember correctly, I got this from facilities, that would include, they've transitioned the acres of streets to sidewalks, those, you know, like the North Campus or the Mid-Campus Drive and the other transition those from streets.
I've never seen these.
Because the numbers changed quite a bit for me from last year. So here's another look of our total operating budget. And again, we adjusted this for inflation to kind of show you a trend of how our budget has changed from 06 to 16. Again, this is all funding sources, our $808 million. And we break it out in several different areas. This is more of a by function. So the instruction function, the research function, the public service function. So we break our budget out in those areas, kind of show you what has changed from 06 to 16. Our instructional enterprise has grown as our enrollment has grown. Research in this particular period went down in comparison when you adjust it for inflation from the budgets. Public service, which is a function of our state dollars for extension and activities, that has declined a little bit as the state has disinvested. Academic support, those are functions like the library's office, the dean's office that help support the academic enterprise. You can see those areas have gone down. And then our physical plant, that's probably our biggest one. That you can see we've had a rather large increase in our utilities costs over that 10-year period that well outstrip the rate of inflation. But overall, about an 8% increase, or 8.8% increase in our overall operating budget from 06 to 16, again, adjusted for inflation.
So bottom line things, is it fair to say, Ethan, we've had less than a 1% increase over that 11-year period, and we're educating, we were at least in 15, more students,
right.
More square feet of space. That's kind of a significant thing to look at.
Can you point that out on there real quick? What you say is a less than 1%. I was just trying to.
Well, just the time
11
period
years.
changed from 06 to 16, yeah.
And the overall change is 8.78. You engineering people can do that in your head. I can't.
looking at that same types, the same expenditures, but broken out a little bit differently. Again, salaries and benefits, utilities, scholarships, and then everything else. You can see over that time period, again, adjusted for inflation, we've had a change of about 10.7%. Our utilities costs have just blown up. We have more buildings today than we did. Hopefully they're a little more efficient, but the rate increases have just gone through the roof.
But FY16, we weren't even on business administration.
Well,
It was
that's true.
open.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We would have had probably some debt service expenses for some
Yes.
of our ESCO projects.
Yeah.
So that 10.7% change from 2006 on salaries and benefits, is that mostly made up of added positions?
Yeah,
or
actually,
is that
that's a
more
great
benefit?
point, because in that period of time, you can see our budgeted positions has changed by about 7%, 280 FTE and 75 staff. So we had a faculty increase of 280 FTE and a staff increase of 79 in that period from budgeted positions, right?
So not much of a raise for any of our staff over that 10-year period of time.
All right.
So good. I'm sorry, this is I was gonna ask.
Let's see if I have it.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to look at here, and I believe in plagiarism, right? KU actually used similar slides when they presented to the Board of Regents, and so we shamelessly copied from them. And we looked at our GU expenses, and I'm just going to focus this now on the main campus. And we took those expenses, we adjusted them for inflation, and then we divided them by our fall FTE student count to see, as it relates to our change in enrollment patterns, how are we spending on a similar trend over that period of time. And you can kind of see we are. I mean, we're in 2006 in total for GU budget, we were at 14,000 per student FTE back in 06, and we're at 15,000. So again, about a 9% change in total GU expenses per student headcount. But what has changed significantly is our difference in how that funding mix looks. You can see a rather significant drop in our state funding portion of that. But we've had to increase our tuition costs accordingly to bring that, keep that same sort of level of expense over that period of time. Yeah.
That doesn't tell the total picture because that's just GU.
That's just
general,
GU.
General.
Yeah.
We instituted college fees.
That's right.
That have gone directly to supporting our students. So
That's right. That's not in there.
That's a big deal for this group.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yep.
The surcharge dollars would be in there.
That would be in there.
So
'Cause
engineering and business
Business.
surcharge dollars would be in there, but
Not the
ag,
surcharge.
human
College fees are not in here.
That's
But
right.
the faculty surcharge
is.
that's considered the
But
GU.
there's more we're putting toward, students are paying more
That's right.
per student than just
That's right.
GU.
That's right.
Correct.
And the surcharges and fees will be important vocabulary to have throughout the year, because even while they are in these different categories with GU and RU,
That's right.
we typically consider them in the same way as fee proposals. Engineering as well as like arts and sciences come through in the same way, whereas arts and sciences is a fee, engineering is a surcharge. And so those are distinctions because surcharges go towards faculty salaries and those items, and fees go towards more things like equipment, technology, and those items.
Mhm.
I think the way the general used this, General Myers used this particular slide in a presentation to the foundation trustees, which is a very diverse group, and went through, and I think Ethan prepared the slides for him, Budget 101 for our foundation trustees who are really called upon to give to the university, to help the university, give their money to the university. And I think it's pretty significant. And Pat's right, we don't have all the fees in here. The surcharge is, but the fees are not. But it's not that we have increased our spending on a per student basis that much over a, 11-year period of time. About 1% each year. Less than.
So you're probably saying, all right, K-State, what are you doing? You're with all that,
All that
or
money.
what are you doing to be efficient, right? And I think that's probably everybody when you're facing increased costs. You're trying to say, how are you being more efficient with those dollars? Some of the operational efficiencies that we've pushed as an administration is paperless processing. You might think we would be all the way there, but we are higher ed, and sometimes change is a little slow for us. But I know just within my own office, we did not print very many budget books this year. We have it available online. We told individuals, if you want it, you can go look at it there and search it. And that's, I mean, that's small, but it's a change, and we're trying to, we want to push that on there. Increased use of our business procurement card, basically a credit card for the university. We want people to utilize that more. It's more efficient than it is individuals going out and buying items and having to go through a full reimbursement process. We can just have the statement from the state's business card, and we can pay that bill from there. There is a purchasing collaboration that we've been working on with other Regents universities to use their procurement contracts rather than having to go through the expense and effort of our own contract. So we can just generally go utilize KU's contract for whatever service that might be out there. One of the major things that we did also might seem pretty simple, but it was a bit of a change, is in terms of our maintenance teams. We went from more individuals that would have responded to any particular building on campus. So if I'm an electrician, I might have gone to from the east side to the west side in one day to respond to a service call, which is a rather inefficient use of my time because I might be driving or walking in between those facilities, to more of a zone maintenance area team where I'm dedicated to a specific area and I might be operating and working on just those buildings within that area. So then I'm less downtime of me traveling. I get to know the buildings better. So it's a little more efficient use of our maintenance teams in providing building services. IT, and I'm sure somebody in IT, one of you IT students probably understands this a lot better than I do. We converted to a migrated to a converged hardware architecture. It's a faster response time, has some utility savings on there. We also converted computer labs to a virtual desktop environment that reduces some hardware costs. Rather than maintaining the computing effort right directly on your on your desktop, it's a virtual environment, so that saves on some costs there for us. Sustainability, we've also going through in terms of energy conservation projects, converting fluorescent lighting, some building controls, and of course our chilled water plant project is an effort out there to be more efficient in terms of our utility usage. And of course, we've tried to increase our recycling.
How many of you noticed the thing that went away in front of Calvin Hall?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was that?
Part of that chill plant.
Yeah.
Huh.
Made a noise, looked ugly,
Yes.
and I don't know, I walked in from the parking garage and didn't notice it was gone. I was on vacation, I came back out, and there I wrote to Cindy and to Ryan and said, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew it was going, but I didn't know when. But it's that kind of thing. I mean, we're trying to centralize all that.
Yeah.
That's as far as I can go. Any mechanical engineers here that can help me. But that's the kind of, and I think there's another piece of it that's going to go away at some point.
I keep wondering, there's one down by the parking lot. I always
Exactly.
keep wondering if it's
I'm
one of those is
hoping
going to
it's
go.
that one.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
So has that been a big strategy to see what services can be centralized? Because Department of Communication Marketing, correct me if I'm wrong, has been a centralized service in this time frame,
Mhm.
correct?
That's exactly.
Is there
right.
anything else that has become a centralized service?
I know in VPAF, an effort that we're
Yes.
going through right now is what the concept called shared services, support services. And so, VPAF I think they have 5 different departments, and within each of those departments, somebody might have done accounting for 10%, 15% of their time, and they might have done HR for 15% of their time. So it's a rather inefficient use of FTE. And so what we're looking at as a initiative is plucking some people out of those departments, putting them centrally, and then those individuals are providing that service back to those departments. But they're doing it all the time. I think that's the main thing to think about. Instead of somebody just doing an action once in a while, maybe not doing it right, probably having it returned to them several times because they only do it once every 6 months, and there's errors. You've got dedicated people that are providing that service all the time and being a little more efficient.
Will that remove them from the college budget, like the college's budgets? Or
right now,
where does that money come out of?
Right now, it's all within the VPAF, our administration finance. We're hoping that with success in the VPAF unit, that endeavor takes off in the colleges. That Met already does it. They have their functions centralized.
Arts and Sciences
It's
is
working.
trying, and Andy might be able to tell us more about
Working
that. They're
towards that.
doing it more on a nutrition level, so that when somebody retires or resigns here, then they might consolidate services rather than, you know, having to lose somebody in another way.
It's been more the smaller departments that have, the larger departments tend to have people who are more specialized already. The smaller departments, the department heads say we're getting services that we weren't getting before. And at least 2 of the people doing shared services used to work in the math department, which tends to function as sort of the AAA team for the college. We're just large enough to train people in everything, and we're not one of the big departments, so they move up out of us. But I've talked to a couple of them because they do spend a lot of time walking across campus now because they're going places, and the staff who are doing it are happy.
Good. As you get to know Andy, you'll know that AAA is part of his lingo.
Yeah. Baseball highest minor below the major leagues.
Not ever ready. Royal.
As I wrap up, I wanted to provide some common items that drive tuition rate increases, just so you have this as an understanding of why we as a university or as an administration might be coming to you for a tuition rate increase. Utility rate costs, those are going up. I actually had, completely unrelated to this presentation, I talked with Casey Lauer, he's our environmental guru over in facilities, and I'd had a question about whether there had been a rate change from Westar, sort of a surprise rate change, and he did confirm that for me. Apparently, there was a rate increase, and then Westar was kind enough to then change our categorization of what type of an entity we are in terms of charging us a rates. And so that went, and you haven't heard this before, but I just learned it today. But a rather significant increase because Westar now considers us a different type of entity, raised the threshold, and so our rates have gone up accordingly. So he confirmed that one for me today. Now, luckily, in terms of managing that cost from their original projections, we've seen some savings in natural gas rates, so that's offset some of that unexpected increase coming to us. But we face that every year. We have increasing rates from the utility companies, and there's not much that we can do as an entity to prevent that. And so we build that into our base budget every year. Jack and Jessica, you guys see that as a line item on our 3-year planning document that we go through in budget advisory committees. The estimate of what we're going to face is increasing utility costs.
But it does speak to conservation efforts and behavioral changes that we really want to encourage with sustainability.
I feel like oftentimes the question about utility costs that comes up is that those are derived in some ways, I know just from utility rates rising, but because we are building new facilities on campus.
Absolutely.
That's why.
Absolutely. We have increased our square footage. We've got a brand new business building. That's another increase in overall square footage that we're trying to service. And so that drives up our costs. Yep. Absolutely right. We have, and I literally pulled all of these from our 3-year planning document, just so you know, this is what we're facing this next fiscal year. We had huge increases at the state level to our mandated employer paid benefits. So we had a huge increase as an employer that we are now paying for all of our employees on health insurance costs. Just went through the roof for us, as well as a few other indices. Our retirement rates for some of our USS employees, that fringe rate cost has gone up. Primarily, two reasons. The health insurance rate increase has gone up because the state has determined that the state is not meeting a minimum threshold of funds reserved within a central fund to provide enough equity in there. So they've jacked our rates. And this isn't just us, it's every state agency out there that's facing this. And then our capers as well. You've probably heard or seen headlines where they talk about the actuarial liability that exists out there for our capers covered employees. That's our public employment retirement system. Those rates are increasing every year to try to minimize the anticipated payout versus the fund balance that exists at capers level.
So one of the things that we'll be dealing with is not only does the university side of health benefits go up, the individuals, you know, this is a graduate student, at one point we were dealing with that. For our employees, our cost of insurance has gone up, and in the lower brackets of salaries, this is a big percentage of their salary now is committed to their health insurance, which is really critical.
You'll see salary initiatives potentially come through. Our faculty salaries currently rank at or near the bottom of our peer comparison institutions. And so as we look to try to recruit faculty to provide the best educational experience that we can, it's hard to compete with our peers when we pay very low overall salaries. And so that's another issue that you might see, or a reason why you might see a rate increase. And then honestly, outside of faculty, in FY 2015, that was the last year that we had a general salary increase for all staff. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Did USS get that?
Yes.
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 That's
In 2015.
since they became USS, that's the only increase they got.
Yeah.
I mean, prior to that, the last general salary increase for all employees would have been like 08 or something. So it's not just it's been 2 years, it's been once in the last.
Well, remember, we had
7 or 8
some
years.
mid-years and you know, across the board, so don't forget those in terms
No,
of.
I don't think those hit.
For USS, I think.
Not for USS,
Yes,
you're
that's right, for
absolutely right.
USS.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And university, USS is university support staff. And so, or not, university support staff. And that represents professional staff, or how would you describe that category of employees?
It's sometimes difficult. Facilities workers, office staff, but you can run into situations they complain about in arts and sciences, for instance. The dean secretary is professional staff who would have gotten a raise. The associate dean secretaries are university support staff and didn't get raises. And it's a bit odd when you have an office and one person gets the raise and the other two don't, because the distinctions can get sort of arbitrary in places.
And the reason that our university support staff didn't get raises previously is they were classified staff, and it was supported by the state. And the state determined if they got a raise or not, not us. We wanted at one point to try to give them a raise, but we're not allowed to. So the first year they transitioned from classified staff to USS, they got a raise, but then we've been stalled in our finances and haven't been able to give them anymore.
So as a business, it's hard to recruit and retain the best employees to operate the university when we're not able to provide any sort of salary increase to them for the last 2 years. And looking at 18, it's going to be difficult again as well. So you're looking at 3 years potentially before the vast bulk of our employees have seen a salary increase. So did you have something?
I think this kind of speaks to that, but and this year on campus there has been, or throughout the past year, total rewards, and so there are, the university has done a study of how we are paying employees at the university. I don't want to mischaracterize this, but that study is anticipated to show employees what category they're in at the institution, as far as what salary they should be getting and what their rate should be as it relates to the median market rate for someone doing their job. And so that's been an issue this year, especially with university support staff and how they're being paid. And so people will be kind of expecting raises or hoping for raises based on that information.
And I think that's exactly right. And I think you're also,
Characterized it very well.
yeah, you're spot on. And I think employees that are facing, you know, myself, my own health insurance costs have gone up. And all of our employees face that because you have to pay in on your own. And so again, you're now paying more out of pocket, but you're not seeing any sort of a salary issue to at least offset some of that. And so if you're a custodial worker and you're making, I don't know, $24,000, $25,000 a year, and you see a large change in your health insurance costs, that's devastating for some families, honestly. Some people.
Decisions to, you said 81%, and I might get this wrong, 81% staff salaries and benefits of the general use, correct?
Yeah.
Across the board. And what it looks like is that that's been pretty much protected in terms of a lot of these cuts and stuff like that. Is that protected because 81% and the number of 5,000 or whatever the faculty, what number you got there, 4,000? Or whatever that is, are absolutely essential to the university? Or is it because of protecting the environment of the university, like layoffs and stuff could look like that, or not even layoffs, but hiring freezes, like seeing our revenue go down from the state, but seeing our positions go up over the 11 years. Like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the decision for the university to protect that 81%.
Who wants that one?
Go.
So students have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we are going to provide services, then we have to have people to provide those services, which is why the number of employees has gone up 7%.
Mhm.
It's just well, the state funding's gone down, you guys haven't. And we're trying to continue to provide services. And so I think most department heads would say we haven't added as many people as we need, given the increase in student population and the increase in requirements for federal mandates and various things.
So essentialness, like they are essential to
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that Dr. Bosco's unit faces and others are these unfunded federal mandates that Andy just alluded to. Title IX, Clary Act, some of the other compliance things that, you know, we'll get dinged by the Department of Education if we're not doing everything correctly. And yet they're providing us less funds and we're having to hire people to help us be in compliance. And I can speak to that much more vividly than I can.
I'm taken back by Jessica understanding what we did with
Total rewards, I am too.
She had it better than me, that's for sure.
Yeah.
What we've gone through. What you're getting is a tremendous amount of information, and it's pure. Unfortunately, when we make sausage, it's not that way. You brought it back to energy important. What do we try to do? We've tried to keep the quality of experience the same or to improve. And we've done the best job we can under enormously difficult challenges. We took a one-time cut March 1 of last year. For a student life, it was $500,000 one time, and 81% was in salaries. So I took it out of other operating expenses, but kept things going. This year, we took another $500,000 cut in student life. It was a permanent cut. So shared services, taking advantage of retirements and doing everything we can to maintain, as Dr. Bennett said, the quality of the experience at K-State. Now, the other shoe is going to drop, and that's probably what our committee is going to have to address. There's going to be additional budget cuts, and how are we going to balance our interest of wanting to keep the quality of the educational experience at K-State alive and well, and still maintaining the kind of positions we're talking about. And the salary thing just hits me. So July of 14 was the last time we received a salary increase. July of 14, and now we're going to look at what in January 17.
Yeah.
So it's been 3 years where the people that are teaching, advising, the financial aid people, the admissions people, the housing people across the academy, every single increase. how do we address that and still try to keep the cost of education reasonable for students?
So we set our budget at the university, and we have to make assumptions, and Ethan's really good at helping us think about those assumptions. They know what utility costs have gone up, so we try to plug that in. The last number of years, we've put in a projection on enrollment, student credit hour generation. Well, we've not hit that enrollment the last 2 years for lots of different reasons. And other things. And what Dr. Bosco just mentioned is 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year, we got a rescission. You had to come up with dollars. So Andy's working his department, he's teaching his classes with the faculty he has and staff, and he had to give back money. And then it became the base budget cut in July. You read the paper just like all of us do. We know that we haven't hit the projections on tax revenue for the state in months and months and months and months. So do we think that we're going to get another budget cut? Yeah, we do.
One of the other things that we are wrestling in, two other things really, that we're wrestling as in the Budget Advisory Committee as we try to balance our budget, right? So our task in this committee, in our Budget Advisory Committee, is to present to the President and the President's Cabinet a balanced budget for next fiscal year, addressing our drop in revenue from our drop in enrollment, as well as any potential budget cuts. And that's that last one there. We know we're going to have some, or we're 99.9. If I ever go to Vegas, I'd probably have pretty good odds.
Yeah, yeah.
To backfill some of those state funding cuts. So that's where we're at. That's what we're struggling with every year, to try to keep costs low, but still keep operations moving along. So I'm going to give you guys three additional numbers for you to have in your minds as you continue your work here on the committee. I just wanted to give you, for your own information, what a 1% tuition rate increase, the general tuition rate increase, would generate for the main campus budget. And that's about $1.8 million. So for about every 1% that we would raise the base tuition rate, generates about $1.8 million. That does not include any college-specific fees or the faculty surcharges fees as well. This is just that base tuition increase. So that generates about $1.8 million. A 1% state funding cut that we would experience here, thanks to our declining revenues at the state level, costs us about $1.4 million. So almost one for one there, really. For every 1% the state cuts us, a 1% tuition rate would offset that. And then if you just want to look at for a faculty salary initiative, whatever a 1% merit, and staff, yeah, faculty and staff, a 1% merit increase costs about $2.4 million.
2.4?
Yeah, $2.4 million. So as the Budget Advisory Committee wrestles with balancing the budget, we're looking at potential scenarios of what is a tuition rate increase provide us, what is potential state going to do to us. Bottom line, I don't think any of us are probably thinking that after the end of the day, the Budget Advisory is done, that we're not still going to face budget cuts even if we raise tuition. I think we are all anticipating that at some level. Yeah.
Does a drop in enrollment affect that 1% equaling 1.8?
It would. It would be. Yeah. Yes. It does. Yes. Yeah. It would. Because our mix changes, right? Our number of credit hours produced. That's how I calculated would go down, and so that would drop. Thank you.
Well, the last number you said that was $2.4 million. That's a 1%. You
Right.
said it's across. What is that across the board?
Merit
Salary.
increase. Merit. Yeah, across the board merit increase for
So
all
each every
positions.
K-State employee or just faculty?
Every K-State employee. Yeah.
At the landing lecture a few weeks back, Georgia Tech's president was here, but Peterson, or no, but
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that they have done projections on what it would be to be a completely tuition-based institution because of fears of state allocation. Does Kansas State have those models for us?
Okay. I've never done that. I've never wanted to.
Yeah,
I mean, that'd be taking $150 million out of our budget.
for sure. But understanding the current climate, I didn't know if that projection has been there.
I've never done
That's a
it.
good question, but
That is a good question. Yeah. And I hope we don't get there, honestly. I mean, the state needs to recognize the critical investment that we are as a higher ed institution and provide resources for that.
And I think the implications of us going completely tuition, you're not suggesting that obviously, but I don't think that's the recommendation you're making with this committee. But I think that would have several implications, along with the fact that since we're a land grant institution, we do provide that extension and service element to the state. And so I'm assuming that going somewhere even more that direction would greatly affect those services that we provide to the whole state.
And affordability and access, that's the other part of the land grant mission that we have to maintain and keep in mind.
so I think someone asked, did we have to sustain a cut even when we increased to, or I think you stated we'd have to sustain a cut in our current budget even if we increase tuition. Last year, we left this committee with a 5% recommendation. We had a cut, an additional cut from the state. To balance our budget, we had to increase tuition by 5.81%. And we still, what was our give back? 4.3?
Yeah, yes.
So Dr. Bosco's budget decreased by 4.3%. He mentioned $500,000. My budget was reduced by 4.3%. Andy's budget. Everybody's budget went down 4.3%, even though we increased your tuition by 5.81, which we didn't want to do.
One thing Jack asked about the 1% merit increase. And you said that's 1% across the board. Technically, an across the board raises, everybody gets 1%, and we have done that once or twice.
Yes.
More typically, a 1% merit pool is unit heads will be told, you have this much money, which is 1%, and you can give, and probably some people will get 0.5% and some people will get 1.5%. That is very important for morale when I'm asking people, can you take on something extra? And they'll say, if I do this, if for several years they know that if they do that, I'll like them, but they can't spend my smile. It's a whole lot easier to get some things done if you say the people who are doing more work will get recognized for this. And right now, it's getting hard because they know I don't have much in a way to recognize them.
When you talk to faculty about doing more or you're putting more effort in whatever, and not just faculty, staff, that commit themselves so much to Kansas State University. Well, they're not doing it for the money, and if we give a 1% to everybody, you guys have been doing a heck of a job. I've been sitting back a little bit, but we all get the same raise. That does not make anybody feel good.
Well, maybe my last question.
No, you're fine.
You said, Dr. Mason said that you guys do projections and assumptions based off of the expenditure of what utilities and stuff. Do you guys look at revenue? What is more volatile, the state appropriation, or is it the tuition is going to be more volatile over the next?
That's a very good question. I think I know what I would have answered 2 years ago.
I'd say our state right now, our state funding is probably the most volatile. We just don't know. We don't know. We're projecting a 5%, but honestly, I have no idea. The states, they're down, let's see, 80 million, I think, for the year, just for the first 5 months of the year. They're down 80 million from projections. The state is going to go back and touch up those projections again to take them, revise them based on the experiences that they had since the last time, which would have been April. Was the last time they touched them up. Come back in November 10th. They're going to touch them up again. They're going to drop them. I mean, they're going to have to. They're not meeting projections. They know they have some revenue sources that just aren't there. And so they're going to drop those projections, which then spurs the governor, because that's what he has to set his budget to, are those revised lowered projections. So in January, he's going to present a budget that has to balance back to those lower revenues. And without some sort of tax initiative, that's what we're facing at this point. So we're right now in planning, we're saying 5%, but I don't know at this point.
This would be the 8th year in a row of decreases either because of state fund takeaway or increased expenses. And, you know, Dr. Bosco's budget, my budget, Andy's budget, Ethan's budget, it's just getting awfully tight. And we don't want to put it on all on student fees and tuition. This is a great overview. It's not a happy story, I'm sorry to tell you, but.
Yeah, and I think all of this context will be very important as we move into thinking more specifically about tuition and fees and how those fit into the larger picture, and thinking about very importantly, since this is a student-focused, student-centered committee, how raising tuition affects students and how raising fees affects students, and how the unpredictability of those increases maybe affects the way students are financially planning. But I think all of these factors are also very helpful to know how the university has responded to these issues over the last few years, and how the other folks on our campus, faculty and staff, are being paid, or how their departments are being allowed to function or not function as they have been for years.
So I want to compliment Jessica and Jack for starting this committee so early so that we could spend this whole time talking about not tuition increases, not fees or anything, but what we're dealing with as a university. And, you know, I might ask you if Ethan could come back at a couple of key times when we hear from the governor, what that budget will look like and the impact to us. And as I said, a number of us are on the budget advisory committee, so we can always update you, but Ethan's the guy with the hand on the pulse of things. So,
any other questions? Anything else?
These have been really great questions today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for letting me come.
Thank you.
I didn't put you to sleep, right? Everybody still awake? Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. No problem.
Thanks, good evening.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye.
Happy election night.
Yes.
Happy election night.
Obviously, like Provost Mason said, never a happy picture to hear about when we're thinking about the areas that really kind of hamstring our university budget, and the factors we'll have to consider over the next few months making these recommendations. But I do think this is good educational material. I think Jack and I are going to get our hands on the final PowerPoint and be able to send it out to you all so you can have those numbers. I saw some of you writing furiously, which is great, but hopefully you can get a hard copy of that as well to make sure that you can have that information. Jack and I are also going to be sending you out before the next meeting the orientation packet for tuition and fee strategies. That includes several of the past year's recommendations at the end of the year for tuition as well as college-specific fees. We thought this presentation might provide some good context, and then getting all of that information after that would be helpful. We also, you mentioned making the budget books paperless. It's very long, and so if you all are okay with that, it's going to be paperless because it's a compilation of years and years, and we wanted to pack it full with information. It might end up being close to 200 pages, so paperless is good. With a table of contents and very helpful.
Does it have Control F feature?
What is that?
There's a couple of them that have to
Find it.
Find? I think we can make that.
Okay.
Yeah,
PDF.
definitely a detailed table of contents.
It'll be organized to the point where you can navigate it pretty easily. But my hope is that when Jessica and I talked about, get it out next week, and then, you know, take, you know, maybe some light reading probably on Thanksgiving break or winter break. I know that Trent will want to know.
Yeah,
I know Trent will be all over that, so hopefully the rest of you follow suit.
If there's anything we want you to really know before our next meeting, we'll indicate key sections, not expect please have 150 pages read. But we will, I think, time over Christmas break or time over Thanksgiving break will be excellent to look over that material, because I know I've really enjoyed reading all of those past documents and getting a better historical context. I think you'll find that In the early years of this committee, in 05, 06, and to now, we've shifted from doing a lot of thinking about different tuition models to focusing a lot on college-specific fees, which speaks to both the work of this committee and the overall budgetary functions of the institution. And so we can get into more of that conversation in the next couple of meetings too, and what that means for how we pay for college and what that means for this group.
There was one thing I was going to clarify regarding this orientation packet that Jessica said depends on the final reports. I was just going to mention that what that is that's at the end, sometime in April or May is when we were putting together that, last year was in May, that's when we're putting together that report that ultimately contains our recommendations to the university president for what he or she would take to K-Board.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions tonight? We have it indicated that in the next couple of meetings, we've emailed out about, and they're on your agenda as well. They'll be not in this room, but in the brand new SGA conference room.
Which is where?
On the first floor.
I'll send out
Still
another email
haven't
about
been in
this.
it, but-
So yeah, on the first floor, kind of where the old computer store, multicultural student center, and radio used to be. So if you go in, unfortunately, the only door that can be used that is usable at the moment is the east door off of that main kind of walkway if you're going from the bridge to the parking garage to the front door.
Across from the convenience store.
Hang right, and you go right back from there, and we actually have are moving in tomorrow, hopefully, so I'm looking forward to take it in there. So yeah, I'll send out an email about that.
So which is the first floor?
I know, that's
One
so
floor down.
confusing.
One floor down from here, or depending on which one you enter.
It's where all the multicultural office, radio station, all that used to be.
And so what I was gonna say is I think that next week will be a lot of some more like goal setting, so looking at some timelines.
Yeah, and talking about kind of specifically what tuition fee strategies committee does and what will be expected of you as a committee member.
Yeah, because I was gonna say as we got started, I was just kind of thinking, having sat down on these meetings and stuff, Jessica's been on this committee for a long time, and thinking about, we know exactly how this is going to work when people come in and we hear these proposals and stuff, but so we're going to be sure to dive into that next week as to what those look like. And then ultimately, we're hoping that the meeting after fall break on the 29th, we can get Sue Peterson, who's our director, or somebody from government relations, Sue, and also government relations, to discuss results of what happens tonight. What that means
The
for
impact on us.
what that means for us. So
So I'm sure everyone wants to go look at the news or something's going on today, I hear.
there is a UPC event on the first or in the courtyard of the union. I think would be pretty fun. So we'll come by there. Otherwise, thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions tonight. This was great.